She automated a $75 million logistics backbone, quietly filed licensing under her own LLC, and made the company look bulletproof until the CEO's lover accused her of padding invoices and sabotaging the integration. The worst part? The board believed her. For 2 hours. Until Clause 11.3 detonated. And when the smoke cleared, the only person still standing was the woman they had tried to fire. My name is Erin West, and on that Monday morning at 9:32 a.m., I knew my career at Nexora Logistics was about to implode. Not because I'd made a mistake, I don't make those anymore, but because the woman standing at the head of our executive conference room had decided I was expendable. "This is Isla Moreau." CEO Marcus Hartley announced, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. "She'll be joining us as our new digital strategy consultant." Digital strategy consultant. I'd built our entire digital infrastructure from scratch, and now his mistress needed a title that sounded important enough to justify her presence in C-suite meetings. I kept my expression neutral, fingers tracing the edge of my leather portfolio. Inside, 18 months of documentation waited like loaded ammunition. Isla clicked to her first slide. The projector hummed, casting harsh light across her angular features. She was beautiful in that calculated way, the kind of beauty that required 2-hour morning routines and monthly Botox appointments. Her presentation title filled the screen in bold red letters: Irregular Licensing Patterns, Source West. The room shifted. 8 executives around the polished mahogany table suddenly found their phones fascinating their coffee cups, urgently needing refills. Nobody wanted to make eye contact with the woman being executed in PowerPoint. Over the past 3 weeks, Isla began, her voice honeyed with false concern. "I've conducted an extensive audit of our technology contracts. What I've discovered is troubling." She clicked again. My face appeared on screen, my corporate headshot from 2 years ago when I still believed in this company. Next to it, a maze of arrows and boxes, purporting to show financial flows. "Ms. West has been double-dipping," Isla announced, "collecting her substantial salary while simultaneously billing us for licensing fees through a shell company." Shell company. That's what she called EW Systems, the LLC. I'd properly registered and disclosed in every single technology agreement I'd signed. But context was for people who cared about truth, and this room had already chosen its narrative. Marcus leaned forward, his disappointment perfectly rehearsed. "Erin, these are serious allegations. What do you have to say?" I opened my portfolio, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the table. "I say you should have your legal team review Section 11.3 of our pending acquisition agreement with Lyrian Freight Holdings." His face tightened. "That's not relevant to—" "It's about to be." Isla's smile wavered for half a second before reasserting itself. Classic deflection. When confronted with evidence of embezzlement, she threatens the company with, "I'm not threatening anyone." I turned the page in my portfolio, scanning notes I'd memorized months ago. "I'm simply reminding you that unfounded reputational attacks leading to product disruption constitute grounds for deal suspension. Vendor initiated." The room went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. "You're not a vendor," Marcus said slowly. "You're an employee." "I'm both." I pulled out another document. As clearly stated in the integration agreement signed January 15th of last year, every core module of our logistics system is licensed, not transferred, from EW Systems, my company. CFO Janet Torres grabbed the paper, her reading glasses catching the light as she scanned. I watched her face pale with each paragraph. "This can't be legal," she muttered. "Page 4, subsection C," I offered helpfully. "Reviewed and approved by Hartford and Associates. You signed off on it yourself, Janet. Right there." I pointed to her signature. "In blue ink, if I recall correctly." Isla's presentation still glowed behind her, my face staring down at a room full of executives who were beginning to understand their predicament. She clicked frantically to the next slide. More arrows, more accusations, but the spell was broken. "You set this up," Marcus said, his CEO voice cracking. "You deliberately—" "I protected my intellectual property." I closed the portfolio with quiet finality. The same way any consultant would. The fact that you chose to attack my reputation without understanding your own contracts isn't my failure. It's yours. Head of Legal, Thomas Chen, cleared his throat. We need to review all documentation immediately. If what Ms. West is saying is accurate, it is. Then any action taken against her I stood smoothing my blazer. Tom, we're past could. Ms. Moreau's presentation has been running for 8 minutes. That's 8 minutes of defamation in front of the entire executive team. Would you like me to calculate the reputational damages now, or should I let my attorney handle that? Isla's face had progressed from confident to confused to furious. You can't just... Actually, I can. I picked up my portfolio, my coffee mug, the one that said, World's Okayest Systems Architect, a Secret Santa gift from happier times. In fact, I'm suspending myself pending investigation. Can't have irregular licensing patterns contaminating your pristine operation. Aaron, wait. Janet's voice carried an edge of panic. If you suspend access to the systems... I'm not suspending anything. The systems will run perfectly. They always do. I paused at the conference room door, looking back at 8 faces cycling through the stages of corporate grief. But you might want to check the licensing terms for next quarter. I believe renewal negotiations are due in 6 weeks. The last thing I saw before leaving was Isla's presentation still projecting my face above her careful lies. She'd spent 3 weeks building a case against me. I'd spent 18 months building an escape hatch. I walked through the cubicle farm toward the elevators, passing coworkers who'd already heard whispers of my impending doom. Their sympathy was premature. They thought they were watching an execution. They were actually watching a detonation. The elevator doors closed on my 12 years at Nexora Logistics. When they opened again in the parking garage, I was already composing the email that would freeze a 9-figure acquisition and bring Marcus Hartley to his knees. But first I sat in my car and laughed. Really laughed. Because Ela Moreau thought she'd found irregularities in my licensing patterns. She had no idea how irregular things were about to become. 18 months ago, I'd walked into Nexora Logistics as their last hope. Their supply chain was hemorrhaging money, $7 million in Q3 alone, and their systems looked like someone had duct-taped Excel spreadsheets to a prayer. The board had given Marcus an ultimatum: fix it, or find a new job. We need a complete digital transformation, he'd said during my interview, desperation barely concealed behind his executive veneer. Someone who can build us a world-class logistics platform. Someone who thinks differently. I should have paid attention to that last part. The first 6 months were brutal. I worked 18-hour days mapping every inefficiency, every redundancy, every place where human error created million-dollar mistakes. The existing system wasn't just broken, it was actively hostile to improvement. Legacy code dating back to 1997 held critical processes hostage. Vendors had locked us into contracts that charged us for breathing. But I saw something others didn't. The bones of something elegant. Hidden beneath layers of technical debt was a logistics network that, properly orchestrated, could move freight with the precision of a Swiss watch. That's when I created Ghost Rail. The name started as a joke. Sarah from procurement said our inventory moved like phantom trains. You knew they existed, but you could never quite see where they were. But the more I built, the more the name fit. Ghost Rail would be invisible, intangible, everywhere and nowhere. A layer of intelligence that sat above our physical operations, predicting, adjusting, optimizing. The technical architecture was beautiful. Machine learning models that could predict port delays 3 days out. Dynamic routing that adjusted to weather, traffic, and labor disputes in real time. Supplier synchronization that eliminated the 3:45 a.m. panic calls when shipments went missing. But the real innovation wasn't technical, it was legal. I need to establish an LLC, I told my lawyer over coffee one morning. For consulting, she asked. For ownership. I'm building something that will save them $75 million annually. I want to make sure I'm properly compensated. She raised an eyebrow. You want to license your work to your own employer? Is that a problem? Unusual, yes. Illegal, number risky, definitely. I spent weeks crafting the structure. EW systems would own the core modules, the predictive engines, the optimization algorithms, the synchronization protocols. Nexora would license these components integrated with their existing infrastructure. It was clean, transparent, and completely above board. The key was the presentation. I didn't hide anything that would have been stupid and unnecessary. Instead, I buried it in plain sight. Page 47 of the technical specification, I told the board during my quarterly review. Licensing structure for core components. This allows us to maintain flexibility while ensuring continuous updates and support. They nodded, eyes glazed. Nobody reads page 47. Nobody questions success. And Ghost Rail was successful beyond their wildest projections. First quarter, 12 million saved. Second quarter, 22 million. By the fourth quarter, we transformed Nexora from an industry joke into a case study at Harvard Business School. The warehouse manager in Detroit called it magic. The port coordinator in Long Beach said I'd given her back her weekends. Marcus got a 40% raise and started shopping for a yacht. I got a title bump and a corner office with a view of the parking lot. Congratulations on the promotion, Janet had said, handing me the paperwork. Senior Director of Systems Integration. You've earned it. I'd smiled, signed the papers, and filed them next to the LLC operating agreement that made me the actual owner of everything that mattered. The system hummed along perfectly for a year. Ghost Rail evolved, learned, improved. I added features, refined algorithms, expanded capabilities. Each enhancement meticulously documented, properly licensed, transparently billed at rates that were a fraction of market value. Then Marcus met Isla at a fintech conference in Marina del Rey. The changes were subtle at first. Questions about budgets that had never been questioned before. Suggestions that we bring in fresh perspectives on digital strategy. Meetings I wasn't invited to, decisions I wasn't consulted on. We're thinking about hiring a consultant, Marcus mentioned casually one afternoon. Someone to optimize our technical spending. Our technical spending is already optimized, I pointed out. We're running at 17% below industry standard with 3 times the efficiency. Isla thinks we can do better. Isla. First name basis. No last name needed. I started documenting everything after that conversation. Every email, every meeting, every casual hallway comment. My lawyer had called me paranoid. I called it pattern recognition. The pattern became clear when Isla started appearing at the office. Always with Marcus, always with suggestions, always with that particular smile that suggested she knew secrets about everyone in the room. Your licensing model is interesting, she said during one of her visits, studying a technical diagram I'd put on the conference room wall. Very creative. It's industry standard for modular systems, I replied. Is it? That smile again. I'll have to research that. I knew then what was coming. You don't survive in tech this long without recognizing a setup. But I also knew something Isla didn't. I'd been preparing for this moment since the day I signed my first contract. Every module of Ghost Rail had a kill switch. Not malicious. I'm not a movie villain, just a simple licensing check. 30 days after non-renewal, the system would gracefully degrade. 60 days it would enter maintenance mode. 90 days it would stop accepting new data. But the real protection wasn't technical. It was in subsection 11.3 of Nexora's acquisition agreement with Lyrian Freight Holdings, a clause I'd suggested during due diligence when everyone was too excited about the buyout to read the fine print. Any unfounded reputational attack leading to product disruption shall be grounds for deal freeze initiated by vendor. They thought vendor meant their suppliers. They never considered it might mean me. Now, sitting in that Monday morning meeting watching Isla's PowerPoint assassination attempt, I felt the satisfaction of seeing 2 years of chess pieces finally align. She thought she'd found financial irregularities. What she'd actually found was a perfectly legal structure that gave me more control over Nexora's operations than their entire board of directors. The tragedy was that it didn't have to happen this way. I would have renewed the licenses indefinitely, kept improving the system, helped them grow. All I wanted was fair compensation and professional respect. Instead, they gave me Isla Moreau and a PowerPoint full of lies. So I gave them Clause 11.3. Isla Moreau entered my professional life 3 weeks before that Monday morning execution. But I'd been tracking her digital footprint long before she set foot in Nexora's offices. LinkedIn profile: former consultant at 4 companies in 5 years. Each stint ending just as major acquisitions were announced. Instagram: carefully curated lifestyle shots from conference hotels and first-class lounges. Twitter: retweets of thought leadership articles she'd never read, punctuated by vague posts about disrupting the status quo and challenging traditional thinking. She was a particular breed of corporate predator, the kind who specialized in aging executives with failing marriages and expensive habits. Marcus never stood a chance. "I want you to meet someone special," he'd said at the quarterly planning meeting, his hand on Isla's elbow with the possessiveness of a teenager showing off his first car. "Isla has some fascinating ideas about financial optimization." She'd swept into the conference room wearing a white sheath dress that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Her handshake was firm. Her smile practiced her eyes already calculating the value of everything in the room, including me. "I've heard so much about the famous Erin West," she purred, "the woman who saved Nexora." "I just built a system that works," I replied. So modest, she tilted her head, studying me like a specimen. "Marcus says you're irreplaceable." Past tense, already positioning me as history. Over the following weeks, Isla embedded herself into Nexora's ecosystem with surgical precision. She attended meetings she wasn't invited to, requested access to systems she had no business touching, asked questions designed not to learn but to probe for weaknesses. These licensing fees she mentioned during a budget review, her manicured nail tapping my quarterly invoice. They seem substantial. 20% below market rate for enterprise-grade systems. Janet had responded before I could. "We've benchmarked it against—" "I'm sure you have." Isla's smile never wavered. "I just wonder if we're being as efficient as possible. In my experience, internal teams sometimes over-engineer solutions." The seeds of doubt planted with expert care. She started with the small things, questioned my travel expenses to a tech conference, suggested that my team was bloated, despite running leaner than any comparable department, wondered aloud whether we really needed all those servers when cloud solutions existed. "She's trying to make a name for herself." Sarah from procurement warned me over lunch. "Same pattern as Hartford Industries. She comes in, finds a scapegoat, makes them look bad, then positions herself as the savior." What happened at Hartford? CTO fired entire IT department, outsourced to India. The systems crashed 6 months later, but by then she'd moved on to her next victim. I pushed my salad around my plate. "And Marcus can't see it." Sarah laughed, bitter and knowing. "Can't or won't, have you seen the way he looks at her?" The investigation started subtly. Requests for documentation I'd already provided. Questions about processes clearly outlined in manuals nobody read. Access logs pulled for systems I'd built as if my own fingerprints on my own creation were somehow suspicious. "It's routine," Thomas from legal assured me when I asked. "Due diligence for the Lyrian acquisition." But I knew better. I'd seen the calendar invites: Isla meeting with finance, Isla reviewing contracts, Isla analyzing operational efficiency, always during hours when I was conveniently in other meetings or traveling to our satellite offices. The smoking gun came via a forwarded email from a junior analyst who thought I should know. Isla had been building a presentation. The subject line: Operational redundancies and optimization opportunities. I was the redundancy. My systems were the opportunity. That's when I started preparing in earnest. Not just documentation ammunition. Every contract reviewed and highlighted. Every decision paper-trailed. Every conversation with dubious requests recorded under the one-party consent laws of our state. "You're being paranoid," my sister said over wine that weekend. "I'm being realistic." I showed her the folder structure on my personal laptop. 18 months of meticulous records. "She's going to accuse me of something. I just don't know what yet. So what you've done nothing wrong. Since when has that mattered? The accusation when it came was almost elegant in its simplicity. Double dipping, taking a salary while charging licensing fees. The kind of ethical violation that sounded damning in a PowerPoint but fell apart under actual scrutiny. But Isla wasn't counting on scrutiny. She was counting on momentum, on Marcus's infatuation, on a board eager to find cost savings before a major acquisition, on my isolation as the only woman in senior technical leadership. She'd done her homework. I'd give her that. Found every invoice from EW Systems, traced the corporate structure, built a narrative that looked plausible if you squinted and ignored the actual contracts. What she hadn't done was read page 47, or understand what Ghost Rail actually was, or realize that I'd been playing chess while she was still learning checkers. The system is too complex, she told Marcus in a meeting I wasn't supposed to know about, but heard anyway through the thin walls of our executive suite. No one person should have that much control. It's a risk to the organization. She was right about that part. One person shouldn't have that much control. But I did. And in approximately 72 hours, everyone would understand exactly what that meant. The night before the Monday morning massacre, I sat in my home office reviewing everything one last time. The contracts, the code, the carefully crafted emails sitting in my drafts folder, waiting to transform a 9-figure acquisition into a legal nightmare. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should resign quietly. Better for everyone, I screenshotted it, added it to the folder labeled Evidence Harassment, and poured another glass of wine. Isla Moreau thought she was hunting. She had no idea she'd walked into a trap 18 months in the making. I raised my glass to the empty room. Here's to financial optimization. Monday couldn't come fast enough. The parking garage was empty except for security cameras, and my Tesla still smelling of the vanilla latte I'd spilled 3 days ago. I sat there for exactly 47 minutes, not out of emotion, but because I needed to sequence my next moves with surgical precision. First, I logged into my personal cloud storage. Not Nexora's servers, which would be crawling with IT security by noon, but my own private infrastructure. Everything was there: contracts, communications code, repositories, and a folder labeled simply Trigger 11.3. Inside that folder was 18 months of insurance. My phone buzzed. Marcus predictably. Aaron, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. I didn't respond. Misunderstandings don't come with PowerPoint presentations and orchestrated character assassinations. Another text this time from Janet. Legal is reviewing everything. Don't do anything rash. Rash. They thought this was an emotional response. They had no idea every move had been mapped out since the day Isla started asking questions about licensing fees. I drove home slowly, taking surface streets instead of the highway. The familiar route gave me time to think, to savor the careful architecture of what was about to unfold. At a red light on Sepulveda, I pulled up the Lyrian acquisition agreement on my phone. Section 11.3 was buried on page 127 of 200. The kind of clause lawyers put in to cover edge cases nobody expects to happen. Unfounded reputational attacks leading to product disruption. Vendor-initiated freeze rights. Renegotiation triggers. The beauty was in the definition of vendor. Not just external suppliers, but any entity providing licensed technology critical to operations, including quite specifically EW Systems. My laptop was already open on my dining room table when I arrived home. 3 monitors arranged in a perfect semicircle, each displaying different pieces of the puzzle. Contract on the left. System architecture in the center. Email client on the right. I made good coffee from the Ethiopian beans I saved for special occasions, and began composing the email that would detonate Nexora's future. To Lyrian Freight Holdings. Legal Department CC. Sealed, BCC. Sealed. Subject, Notice of Clause 11.3 violation. Recommended action, immediate suspension. The words flowed like code, precise and unforgiving. As of 9:32 a.m. PST today. Nexora Logistics initiated unfounded reputational attacks against EW Systems and its principal, undermining the operational integrity of critical infrastructure. See attached documentation including Exhibit a defamatory presentation alleging financial impropriety. Exhibit B. Text message harassment from Nexora representative. Exhibit C. Pattern of hostile investigation without basis. Exhibit D. Complete licensing agreement showing full disclosure and approval. Per Section 11.3 of the acquisition agreement dated, redacted EW Systems, formally notifies all parties of violation and recommends immediate suspension of proceedings pending resolution. We remain committed to operational continuity during this review period. However, please note that license renewal negotiations are scheduled in 6 weeks. Given recent events, terms will require substantial revision. Respectfully, Aaron West, CEO, EW Systems, LLC. I didn't hit send. Not yet. First, I needed to ensure Isla's spectacular self-destruction was properly documented. The corporate gossip network, faster than fiber optic and twice as reliable, was already buzzing. My phone lit up with messages from colleagues. Holy shit, Aaron! Isla's saying you embezzled. Marcus has lost his mind. Legal's in full panic mode. Are you okay? I ignored them all except one from David in IT, FYI. Isla requested admin access to GhostRail last week. We denied it, but she went to Marcus. Heads up. Admin access. She wanted to lock me out of my own system. The woman really had done her homework. Just not enough of it. At 2:17 p.m., I opened LinkedIn. Time to see Isla trip over her own ambition. Her profile showed her active 8 minutes ago. Then came the post. Excited to announce my new role as digital strategy consultant at Nexora Logistics. Looking forward to optimizing operations and bringing fresh perspectives to their incredible team. Digital transformation, #logistics, #women in tech. Women in tech. The audacity was almost admirable. The comments started immediately. Congratulations from her network of similar predators. Heart emojis from people who didn't know better. And then buried in the responses, gold. Congrats. Isla, same magic, you worked at Hartford. Their systems never recovered, lol. She couldn't help herself. Her response came quickly. Every organization needs someone willing to make hard decisions and clean up messes. Not everyone appreciates necessary changes, but that's what leadership requires. I screenshotted everything, added it to the folder. Hard decisions. Cleaning up messes. She was already writing my narrative for me. At 3:45 p.m., she went live on Tech Talk Daily, a podcast for startup wannabes and LinkedIn influencers. I pulled up the stream earbuds and recorder running. So Isla, tell us about your new role at Nexora. Her voice filled my kitchen syrupy with false modesty. Well, it's really about bringing fresh eyes to established systems. Sometimes organizations get too comfortable with how things have always been done. They need someone to ask uncomfortable questions. Any specific challenges you're tackling? A pause. I could picture her calculating how much to reveal. Let's just say there are some legacy systems and legacy thinking that need updating. The previous technical leadership built impressive infrastructure, but at what cost? Sometimes complexity is just inefficiency in disguise. Legacy systems. Legacy thinking. Previous leadership. She was dancing on my grave before my body was cold. Can you give us an example? Well, without naming names, I've discovered some troubling patterns. Vendor relationships that are perhaps too cozy. Invoicing structures that benefit individuals more than the organization. The kind of thing that happens when oversight gets too relaxed. The host leaned into the drama. Sounds like you're cleaning house. Someone has to. Her laugh was crystalline, sharp enough to cut. The board brought me in to ask hard questions and make necessary changes. Not everyone will be happy, but transformation requires courage. I saved the recording transcribed. It highlighted every defamatory statement. The beauty of Isla's narcissism was its predictability. She couldn't resist the spotlight, couldn't help but brag about her conquest before the war was even over. By 5 p.m., I had everything I needed: the presentation, the harassment, the public statements, a pattern of defamation so clear a first-year law student could prosecute it. But I waited. Patience had brought me this far. At 6:27 p.m., another text from Marcus. "The board wants to meet tomorrow. Please, Aaron, we can work this out." Work it out. Like I was a bug in the code that could be patched with a quick fix. I poured another cup of coffee, now cold but still potent, and pulled up the email draft one more time. Read through every word, every attachment, every devastating piece of evidence. Then I added one more recipient to the BCC line, the Wall Street Journal reporter, who'd written about the Lyrian acquisition. At 7:15 p.m. I hit send. The email left my outbox with the quiet whoosh of a digital arrow finding its mark. Somewhere in Los Angeles, lawyers' phones were about to start ringing. Somewhere in New York, a 9-figure deal was about to freeze. And somewhere in Marcus Hartley's Marina del Rey condo, Ela Moreau was about to learn what happened when you tried to steal from someone who wrote the rules of the game. I closed my laptop, walked to my balcony, and watched the sun set over the Pacific. Tomorrow would bring chaos lawyers and the implosion of everything Marcus had built. But tonight I had 47 minutes of peace in a parking garage, a proven system still running perfectly, and the satisfaction of knowing that every single move had played out exactly as designed. Isla thought she was optimizing operations. She had no idea she'd just optimized her own destruction. The Tech Talk Daily podcast had 23,000 live listeners that Tuesday evening. By Wednesday morning, the clip of Isla describing her necessary changes at Nexora had been shared over 40,000 times on LinkedIn alone. She'd wanted attention. She got it. My phone started ringing at 5:43 a.m. California time, which meant the East Coast lawyers had been up all night. I let it go to voicemail, made coffee, and opened my laptop to watch the beautiful chaos unfold. The first email was from Lyrian's chief legal counsel, Catherine Morrison. Professional cold, and exactly what I'd expected. Ms. West, we have received your notice regarding Clause 11.3. The Acquisition Committee is convening an emergency session at 9 a.m. EST. We require immediate clarification on the scope of potential operational disruption. Please confirm your availability for a call within the next hour. I replied with equal professionalism. Ms. Morrison, I am available at your convenience. All documentation has been provided. EW Systems remains committed to operational continuity during this review period. However, I must note that public defamation is ongoing as evidenced by attached podcast transcript. The second email was from Marcus, sent at 2:12 a.m., written in the desperate prose of a man watching his empire crumble. Aaron, this has gotten out of hand. Isla's comments were not authorized. The board is furious. Please call me immediately so we can resolve this. Nexora needs you. I need you. I archived it without responding. He needed me now. Where was that need when Isla was building her PowerPoint guillotine? By 7 a.m., the LinkedIn post had evolved into a full-blown crisis. Someone, a former Hartford Industries developer, had commented with receipts. Same playbook as Hartford. Came in as consultant, targeted their female CTO, got her fired. Systems crashed 6 months later. Cost them $50 and an SEC investigation. Check the timeline. He'd attached screenshots, dates, names, a pattern so clear it might as well have been a signature. Isla tried damage control, editing her original post to remove the most inflammatory language. But the internet never forgets, and 17 people had already screenshotted the original. Her Women in Tech hashtag had become a rallying cry, just not the way she'd intended. At 8:15 a.m., Catherine Morrison called directly. I'd expected ice. I got barely contained fury. Ms. West, I need you to understand something. Lyrian has invested 18 months and $12 million in due diligence for this acquisition. We are 72 hours from closing a $300 million deal. And you're telling me the entire operation runs on systems that could be shut down by a vindictive ex-employee? I'm not an ex-employee, I corrected calmly. I'm a suspended employee who also happens to be a vendor, and I have no intention of shutting down anything. The systems will continue to run perfectly as they have for 18 months. Then what? What I am telling you is that Nexora's executive team initiated a defamation campaign against their primary technology vendor without understanding their own contracts. They've publicly accused me of fraud. Their consultant went on a podcast viewed by half the logistics industry and implied I'm a criminal. This isn't about vindictiveness, Ms. Morrison. This is about protecting my intellectual property and professional reputation. Silence on the line. Then the podcast. We've seen it. And our acquisition committee is concerned. The optics alone. The optics are that Nexora's CEO hired his girlfriend to eliminate the woman who saved his company. Yes, I imagine those optics are concerning. More silence. Catherine Morrison had built her career on reading between lines, and mine were written in neon. What do you want, Ms. West? I want what I've always wanted. Professional respect and fair compensation. But since Nexora chose character assassination instead, my requirements have evolved. Evolved how? That's a conversation for after your committee meeting. I suggest you ask Marcus why he thought attacking the person who holds the keys to his kingdom was a sound strategy. I hung up before she could respond. Let them sweat. The real entertainment started at 9:30 a.m., when someone leaked Isla's LinkedIn direct messages to a tech gossip blog. Turned out she'd been shopping for her next target while still dissecting me. Hey, Brad. Loved your keynote at FinForward. Quick question, is Datastream still looking for optimization consultants? I'm wrapping up a project at Nexora and have some availability coming up. Sent Monday afternoon. Hours after accusing me of embezzlement, she was already planning her exit. The blog post title was Brutal Digital Strategy Consultant or Digital Succubus, the Isla Moreau Pattern. By noon, 3 more former victims had come forward. A CFO from a medical device company. A VP of engineering from a SaaS startup. The head of IT from a retail chain. All women. All fired after Ila's optimization. All replaced by outsourced teams that crashed within 6 months. But the killing blow came from an unexpected source, Ila herself. Perhaps it was hubris. Perhaps it was damage control. Perhaps she simply couldn't stand being silent while her reputation burned. But at 1:47 p.m., she posted what she probably thought was a defense. Disappointed by the coordinated attacks from those resistant to change. Yes, I ask hard questions. Yes, I challenge the status quo. And yes, that makes some people uncomfortable, especially those who've been taking advantage of their positions. The truth will come out. Standing my ground at disrupt or die. Taking advantage of their positions. She just doubled down on defamation. I screenshotted it, added it to the file, and forwarded it to Catherine Morrison with a single line, "The pattern continues." At 3 p.m., my doorbell rang. A courier with a thick envelope marked, "Confidential legal documents," inside a formal notice from Nexora's board. They were launching an internal investigation. Isla Moreau's consulting contract had been suspended pending review. Would I consider returning to discuss remediation? I laughed until my ribs hurt. They'd suspended her. Not fired, that would admit wrongdoing. Just suspended. The same half measure they'd given me, like we were somehow equivalent problems to be managed. I called my lawyer. They want to negotiate. Of course they do. The Lyrian deal is worth $300 million. Your systems are worth about 200 of that. Without you, they're selling a shell. What's my position? You own them. The question is, do you want the company or just revenge? I thought about Monday morning, about Isla's presentation, about Marcus choosing his bedroom over his boardroom, about 12 years of being the only woman in rooms full of men who saw me as either a threat or a conquest. I don't want revenge, I said finally. I want market value. Which is, I smiled, remembering every late night, every solved crisis, every million saved. About to go up significantly. At 5:23 p.m., Isla's LinkedIn profile vanished. Her Twitter locked. Her Instagram, every meticulously staged conference photo went dark. A full digital retreat in the face of a targeted takedown. But the internet remembered. Screenshots circulated. Reddit threads dissected her pattern. A Wikipedia page appeared, Isla Moreau Corporate Controversy. Someone had done their homework, linking every company, every termination, every suspicious timing. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah in procurement, check the news. I pulled up the Wall Street Journal. There it was, above the fold in the digital edition. Lyrian acquisition in jeopardy, as key vendor disputes. Nexora leadership, 300 man-hours. Deal faces scrutiny after governance concerns. They'd buried the lead until paragraph 3, but there it was. Central to the dispute is an unusual licensing arrangement that gives a single vendor, EW Systems, owned by suspended Nexora executive Aaron West, control over critical logistics infrastructure. The situation has been complicated by allegations of defamation following what sources describe as an orchestrated attack on Ms. West by a recently hired consultant with ties to CEO Marcus Hartley. Ties to CEO Marcus Hartley. The Journal's way of saying sleeping with without saying it. My email chimed. Catherine Morrison again. Ms. West, the committee has concerns. We need to discuss continuity assurances and licensing terms. Can you meet tomorrow? Tomorrow. They were supposed to close Friday. 72 hours to save a deal that had taken 18 months to build. I poured a glass of wine, the good Bordeaux I'd been saving, and started drafting my terms. Not revenge, just market value. Plus 18 months of interest. Plus reputational damages. Plus a new title that didn't report to anyone who could be distracted by a consultant in a white dress. The sun was setting again, painting my apartment in shades of gold and possibility. Somewhere Marcus was probably on his third scotch. Somewhere Isla was scrubbing her digital footprint. Somewhere lawyers were billing overtime to clean up a mess that started with a PowerPoint and a lie. But in my apartment, Ghost Rail hummed along, perfectly moving freight with algorithmic precision, oblivious to the human drama above it. Just like I'd designed it. Just like everything else in this carefully orchestrated symphony of consequences. The board thought they'd suspended me. They had no idea I'd just promoted myself to kingmaker. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. Wednesday in Nexora's top-floor conference room, the one they reserved for executions and celebrations. Today would be both. I arrived 15 minutes early wearing the same blazer I'd worn Monday. Let them see I hadn't lost sleep. Let them see I hadn't scrambled. Let them see exactly who held the power in this room. Security tried to stop me. Ma'am, you're on administrative leave. I'm here at the board's invitation. I held up the formal summons. Unless you'd like to explain to 12 panicked directors why their primary technology vendor was turned away. He stepped aside. The elevator ride to the 40th floor had never felt longer. Each ascending number marked another step toward either vindication or mutually assured destruction. I'd prepared for both. The conference room was already half full. Board members huddled in clusters, their body language screaming anxiety. General Counsel Thomas Hartman, no relation to Marcus despite the name, stood at the window phone pressed to his ear. CFO Janet Torres sat alone, laptop open, probably calculating how much this would cost. Marcus wasn't there. Neither was Isla. Their absence said everything. Aaron! Board Chair Margaret Pearson rose to greet me. 73 years old, built her fortune in steel before pivoting to logistics, and the only person in this room I truly respected. Thank you for coming. Margaret. I took my seat at the table. Not at the defendant's chair they'd probably intended, but in my usual spot. Third from the left, direct sightline to the presentation screen. I assume you've reviewed my documentation. We have. She gestured to the folders spread before each director. It's comprehensive. Comprehensive. I'd given them 600 pages of contracts, communications, and certifications. plus the podcast transcript, plus the LinkedIn screenshots, plus Isla's text message suggesting I resign for everyone's benefit. Before we begin, Thomas Hartman interjected finally off his phone. We need to establish that this meeting is under strict NDA. Nothing discussed here. Actually, I interrupted, that's not accurate. As a vendor, not an employee, I'm not bound by Nexora's internal NDAs regarding my own intellectual property and business relationships. My attorney has prepared a more appropriate confidentiality framework. I slid copies across the table. One page? Simple. Binding. And absolutely favorable to EW Systems. Thomas read quickly, his frown deepening. This gives you the right to disclose anything discussed here if it relates to protecting your business interests. Correct. Just as Ms. Moreau felt free to discuss my alleged financial improprieties on a public podcast, I assume the same freedoms apply. Silence. Margaret nodded slightly. She understood the game. Nexora had broken the rules first. Now they wanted to hide behind them. Fine, Thomas signed. The others followed. Even cornered rats knew when to stop fighting. Now, Pete, Margaret said, regaining control. Let's discuss the situation. The Lyrian acquisition is in jeopardy because your CEO let his girlfriend play executive, I said flatly. Let's not dance around it. Director Patricia Williams, head of the Compensation Committee, winced. That's a serious allegation. Is it? I opened my laptop, pulled up the receipts. Marina Del Rey Ritz-Carlton, January 8th through 10th. Charged to Marcus's corporate card. Same weekend Ms. Moreau was supposedly at a fintech conference in Marina Del Rey. Shall I continue? Nobody asked me to continue. The point, I said, is that Nexora allowed a compromised CEO to weaponize a personal relationship against the architect of your entire digital infrastructure. The fact that this happened during due diligence for a $300 million acquisition shows spectacular negligence. What do you want? Director James Kim asked. Straight to the point. I appreciated that. First, let's clarify what I have. I clicked to the next slide, Ghost Rail's architecture diagram. Every predictive model, every optimization algorithm, every synchronization protocol, all licensed through EW Systems, all legally protected, all critical to the $75 million in annual savings you've been advertising to Lyrian. Janet finally spoke. The licenses are valid for 6 more weeks. Then they require renewal. Given recent events, terms will need substantial revision. How substantial? Margaret asked. I smiled. Time to close this out. Current licensing $2 million per year. Comparable enterprise systems run $5 to $8 million. My earlier pricing assumed a long-term partnership built on mutual respect and professional growth. Since Nexora has chosen to end that partnership through public defamation, we haven't terminated anything, Thomas protested. Haven't you? I pulled up Isla's PowerPoint. Slide 16. Recommendation: immediate termination and legal review for recovery of improper payments. That was before any investigation, before any evidence, before anything except Ms. Moreau's need to eliminate a woman who built something she couldn't understand. The room shifted uncomfortably. They'd all seen the presentation. They'd all sat silent while it played. Furthermore, I continued, Ms. Moreau's public statements have damaged my professional reputation. My LinkedIn messages are full of recruiters concerned about the allegations. My GitHub stars have dropped. My conference speaking invitation for LogisticsCon was mysteriously withdrawn yesterday. We can issue a statement, someone offered. You will issue a statement, but that's not enough. I clicked to the final slide. My terms. New licensing rate $6 million annually with a 5-year minimum commitment. Board seat with veto power over any technology decisions. Title of Chief Technology Architect, reporting directly to the board, not the CEO. And a one-time payment of $3 million for reputational damages. Gasps around the table. Janet's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard. That's $43 million over 5 years. The entire acquisition premium would disappear. Yes, I leaned back. Or you could refuse. The licenses expire in 6 weeks. GhostRail enters sunset mode. Your systems revert to the Excel spreadsheets and prayer circles you had before I arrived. Lyrian walks away. Your stock price craters. And I start my own logistics company with the technology I built. You signed non-competes, Thomas said desperately. As an employee, which I no longer am thanks to your suspension. As a vendor, I signed no such restrictions. Would you like to see the legal opinion 60 pages? But the summary is quite clear. Margaret raised a hand, silencing the growing panic. Give us the room, please. Aaron will need 30 minutes to discuss. I stood gathering my things with deliberate calm. Of course, I'll be in the lobby. But Margaret? The Wall Street Journal is expecting my call at 3 p.m. They want a follow-up quote for tomorrow's edition. I'd prefer to tell them we've reached an amicable resolution. The threat hung in the air like smoke. I left them to their deliberations, taking the elevator down to the marble lobby that had once felt like home. The afternoon sun slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across designer furniture and commissioned sculptures. All of it built on logistics efficiency I'd created. My phone buzzed. Sarah from procurement. Heard shouting from the boardroom. You okay? I typed back, perfect. How's the GhostRail morning report? Green across the board. Oakland Port predicted that delay you flagged. Saved us $400K in holding fees. $400,000 in one morning. $6 million a year was a bargain. At 2:47 p.m., Margaret appeared in the lobby. Her face was carved stone, but her eyes held something like admiration. We accept your terms, she said simply, with one modification. Here it comes, which is, Marcus Hartley will announce his resignation within the hour. We'd prefer if your statement to the Journal reflected confidence in new leadership rather than criticism of the old. I considered. Marcus gone. Isla disgraced. My technology protected and valued. My reputation restored with millions in backing. Agreed. We shook hands. Her grip was firm, respectful. You know, she said quietly, I've been on boards for 30 years. This is the first time I've seen someone turn a witch hunt into a coronation. I didn't turn it into anything, I replied. I just made sure everyone understood the real value proposition. She almost smiled. The contracts will be ready by tomorrow. Welcome back, Chief Technology Architect West. Chief Technology Architect. It had a nice ring to it. I walked out of Nexora's building into the California sunshine. Somewhere 40 floors above Marcus was probably cleaning out his office. Somewhere in the city, Isla was discovering that her LinkedIn messages to other targets had also been leaked. Somewhere in New York, Lyrian's board was breathing a sigh of relief. But I wasn't thinking about any of them. I was thinking about the code review I had scheduled for tomorrow, about the new features I could finally implement without bureaucratic interference, about the team I'd built who'd stuck by me through this insanity. My phone rang. The Wall Street Journal. Ms. West, do you have that statement for us? I smiled, choosing my words carefully. Nexora Logistics and EW Systems have reached a strategic agreement that ensures operational continuity and positions the company for accelerated growth. I'm confident that under new leadership, Nexora will continue to deliver exceptional value to its stakeholders. New leadership is Marcus Hartley stepping down. You'll have to ask Nexora about personnel changes. I'm focused on technology. Always focused on technology, even when the humans tried to burn everything down around it. Especially then. The news of Marcus Hartley's resignation hit the wire at 4:18 p.m. Wednesday afternoon. By 4:30, my phone had become a lightning rod for corporate schadenfreude. Holy shit, Aaron, you actually did it. David from IT, who'd watched this unfold from the server room. Just saw the news. Drinks on me forever. Sarah from procurement, who'd warned me about Isla's patterns. Knew you had something up your sleeve. Welcome back, boss. My team, who'd kept GhostRail running flawlessly while their leader was being crucified. But the call I savored most came at 5:43 p.m., just as I was pouring myself a celebratory glass of champagne in my home office. Aaron, this is Catherine Morrison from Lyrian. The buyer. The $300 million question mark. Catherine, I trust you've seen the announcement. We have. Her voice carried a mix of relief and calculation. The board is reassured by the leadership changes and by your new role. Chief Technology Architect, a title that meant I answered to no one except the board itself. No more CEOs with wandering eyes. No more consultants with PowerPoint weapons. Just me and the code that kept everything moving. However, she continued, we need to discuss the new licensing structure. $6 million annually is a bargain, I interrupted smoothly. Considering GhostRail saves Nexora $75 million annually, that's an 1100% ROI. Unless Lyrian thinks they can build something better. Silence. We both knew they couldn't. The system wasn't just software. It was 18 months of machine learning trained on Nexora's specific operations. Every port delay, every route optimization, every supplier synchronization had made GhostRail smarter. Starting from scratch would take years and millions more than my licensing fees. We'll need performance guarantees, Catherine said finally. You'll get them. 99.9% uptime, sub-second response times, predictive accuracy within 2% margin, all documented, all contractually binding. And if you decide to revise terms again, I smiled, swirling champagne in my glass. The 5-year commitment protects both parties. But Catherine, I didn't want this fight. I wanted to build exceptional technology. Nexora forgot that. I trust Lyrian won't make the same mistake. Understood. We'll proceed with the acquisition as planned. After she hung up, I sat in the gathering dusk, city lights beginning to twinkle beyond my window. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably drowning his sorrows in expensive whiskey. But I wasn't thinking about him. I was thinking about Isla. She'd been quiet since her digital suicide Tuesday evening. Too quiet. I pulled up my monitoring systems, not Nexora's, but my own. Little scripts that tracked mentioned searches, profile views. The internet never forgets, but it does whisper if you know how to listen. There. A new LinkedIn profile created 6 hours ago. Isabella Morgan, Digital Transformation Specialist. Same headshot, slightly cropped. Same empty connections waiting to grow. Same predatory pattern preparing to repeat. I screenshotted everything, then composed an email to a very specific mailing list. Women in Tech Leadership, a private group of C-suite executives who'd learned to watch each other's backs in an industry that preferred them isolated. Subject pattern recognition alert. You may have seen the news about Nexora Logistics. What you might not know is the consultant involved has a history. Hartford Industries, Med Device Solutions, Data Flow Dynamics. Always the same playbook target, female technical leadership, create controversy, exit before systems fail. New profile detected, Isabella Morgan. Stay vigilant. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Within an hour, the network activated. Profile views from Fortune 500 CTOs. Screenshots saved in legal departments. A distributed immune system against a virus in a white dress. Isla Isabella. Whatever she called herself next, would find her hunting grounds had shrunk considerably. Thursday morning came with contracts and champagne hangovers. I arrived at Nexora at 7 a.m., badging in with credentials that had been mysteriously reactivated overnight. The security guard actually smiled. Welcome back, Ms. West. Thanks, Jerome. How's your daughter's robotics team? He beamed. Going to regionals. She said to thank you for the Arduino kit. Small kindnesses, they matter more than grand gestures, especially when your world is being reconstructed. My old office had been cleared out. No surprise there. But my new office, the corner suite that had belonged to the previous CTO, was waiting. Floor-to-ceiling windows, private conference room, direct elevator access, and on the desk a single white orchid with a card, "To New Beginnings, Margaret." I set up my workstation's 3 monitors in the familiar arc and dove into 18 hours of system logs. GhostRail had performed flawlessly in my absence, but there were optimizations to make, features to add, algorithms to refine. Nah. Knock knock. Janet Torres stood in my doorway looking uncomfortable. Got a minute? Of course. She entered, closing the door behind her. I owe you an apology. You were doing your job. No, she shook her head. I was doing what was easy, staying quiet while Marcus paraded that woman around, watching her build a case against you. I knew it was wrong, but you had your own position to protect. That's not an excuse. I studied her. Janet had been at Nexora for 15 years. She'd survived 4 CEOs, 2 acquisitions, and countless market downturns. She was a survivor, and survivors pick their battles carefully. Apology accepted, I said, on one condition. Her eyebrows rose. Next time you see something like this happening to anyone, you don't stay quiet. Deal. She nodded, relief visible. Deal. And Aaron. For what it's worth, the new licensing terms are already approved. The board didn't even blink. After she left, I returned to my screens. Code flowed like music, each function a note in a larger symphony. This was what I'd missed during those 47 minutes in the parking garage. Not the politics or the power plays, but the pure elegance of systems that worked. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but I know what you did, how you manipulated everyone. The truth will come out, I laughed. Actually laughed. She was texting threats while using her actual initial. Even in defeat, Isla couldn't resist leaving a signature. I forwarded it to legal with a note. Please add to the harassment file. No response needed. By noon, the new organizational chart was published. Chief Technology Architect West, reporting directly to the board. Equal standing with the new CEO. Margaret had taken the role temporarily while they searched for permanent leadership. The message was clear. Technology was no longer subordinate to executive whims. I called an all-hands meeting for my team at 2 p.m. The conference room was packed, energy crackling with uncertainty and hope. First, I said thank you. You kept everything running while I was gone. You honored the work even when the leadership didn't honor you. That means everything. Nods around the room. A few suspicious gleams in eyes. Second, things are changing. We're no longer just the tech department. We're the core of this company. That comes with responsibility, but also with resources. I've already approved the infrastructure upgrades you've been requesting, the training budgets you need, the conference attendance they always denied. What about hiring? Asked Raj, my lead engineer. We're down 3 positions. We're approved for 6. I want the best. Doesn't matter where they come from or what they look like, just that they can code and they can collaborate. The room buzzed with excitement. After months of being treated like expensive necessities, they were finally being recognized as essential. One more thing, I said. Some of you might have heard about what happened. The presentation, the accusations, the investigation. I paused, meeting eyes around the room. I want to be clear. I played the game according to the rules. I protected our work and our value. But I never lied, never stole, never did anything except build exceptional systems and demand fair compensation for them. We know, someone said from the back. We never doubted. That hit harder than I'd expected. As the meeting broke up, David lingered. So what happens to Marcus's parking spot? I grinned. You know what, it's yours. You've been biking in rain and shine for 3 years. Time you had covered parking. His face lit up like Christmas morning. The afternoon flew by in a blur of code reviews and architecture planning. By 6 p.m., the office was nearly empty except for the dedicated few who lived for the work itself. I was preparing to leave when my desk phone rang. Aaron, an unfamiliar male voice. This is Robert Steinberg from the Securities and Exchange Commission. We need to discuss some allegations that have been made regarding financial irregularities at Nexora Logistics. My blood chilled. Then I remembered I'd done nothing wrong. Of course, Mr. Steinberg. Would you like to schedule a meeting? I have all documentation readily available. A pause. Actually, Ms. West, you're not the subject of our inquiry. We received a complaint about insider trading related to the recent leadership changes. The complainant suggested you might have relevant information. Isla. Even in defeat, she was still swinging. I'd be happy to cooperate fully, I said. When would you like to meet? The SEC meeting was scheduled for Friday morning at 9 a.m., the same day the Lyrian acquisition was set to close. The timing wasn't coincidental. Isla's final gambit was designed to create maximum chaos, one last grenade lobbed from her bunker of disgrace. I arrived at the Federal Building at 8:30, carrying 2 bankers' boxes of documentation. My lawyer, Christine Yamamoto, met me in the lobby. She'd flown in from Seattle on the red-eye, her usual fierce composure intact despite the overnight flight. "They're fishing," she said as we rode the elevator. "The complaint alleges you had advance knowledge of Marcus's resignation and traded on it. Complete fabrication, but they have to investigate." I know. I shifted the boxes in my arms. That's why I brought everything. Email logs, phone records, trading statements. Let them fish in crystal clear water. The conference room was standard government intimidating fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs, and that particular shade of beige that sucked hope from the air. Robert Steinberg turned out to be younger than his phone voice suggested, maybe early 40s, with the kind of meticulousness that made good investigators dangerous and great ones surgical. "Ms. West, thank you for coming." He gestured to the boxes. "I see you came prepared." "I believe in transparency, Mr. Steinberg, especially when someone is trying to weaponize regulatory bodies against me." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You believe this complaint is retaliatory?" "I know it is." I pulled out my first folder. On Monday, Isla Moreau accused me of embezzlement in front of Nexora's board. By Wednesday, those accusations were proven false and Marcus Hartley resigned. Thursday evening, your office receives an anonymous complaint about insider trading. Would you like to see Ms. Moreau's history of similar tactics? Christine touched my arm, a warning to stay professional. But Steinberg was already interested. Similar tactics. I laid out the pattern. Hartford Industries' SEC complaint filed against their CFO after she rejected a consulting contract. Med Device Solutions. Whistleblower complaint to the FDA after their head of quality questioned Isla's credentials. Data flow dynamics. EEOC complaint after their VP of Engineering refused to rubber stamp Isla's recommendations. None of these complaints resulted in action, Steinberg noted, reviewing my documentation. Because they were baseless, but they achieved their purpose: distraction, legal costs, reputational damage. It's corporate warfare disguised as civic duty. He made notes, then opened his own folder. Let's discuss the specific allegation. The complaint suggests you sold Nexora stock on Monday afternoon, knowing Marcus Hartley would resign Wednesday. I almost laughed. Mr. Steinberg, I haven't sold a single share of Nexora stock in 2 years. More importantly, I've been accumulating shares through my 401k contributions every pay period, including last Monday. I pushed across my fidelity statements. Every transaction highlighted, every automatic investment noted. Not only had I not sold before Marcus's resignation, I'd actually bought more shares during the chaos. Steinberg studied the statements carefully. You increased your 401k contribution to maximum on Monday. I did, because I knew what the board didn't, that Ghostrail's value would force them to act rationally eventually. When you build something essential, short-term politics can't override long-term economics. That's an interesting investment strategy. Christine leaned forward. My client's faith in her own work is hardly evidence of insider trading. She had no advance knowledge of Mr. Hartley's resignation, because that decision wasn't made until Wednesday afternoon. Actually, I corrected. I suspected he might resign, but not from insider knowledge, from pattern recognition. When boards discover their CEO has compromised a $300 million acquisition for personal reasons, resignation becomes inevitable. That's not insider trading. That's understanding corporate governance. Steinberg's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then excused himself. Christine and I sat in silence, the fluorescent lights humming their disapproval. "You're enjoying this," she observed. "I'm enjoying the documentation. Every accusation Isla makes creates another paper trail, another piece of evidence that she's the bad actor here, not me." Steinberg returned, his expression shifted from investigative to intrigued. "Ms. West, we just received additional information. It seems Ms. Moreau filed similar complaints with 3 other agencies yesterday. The Department of Labor, the IRS, and," he paused, "the FBI." "The FBI?" Even Christine looked surprised. "Alleging corporate espionage related to your retention of proprietary code." He sat back down. "Ms. West, I've been doing this for 12 years. I've seen plenty of legitimate whistleblowers and plenty of vindictive individuals. This pattern of simultaneous multi-agency complaints is harassment," I finished, "and it's going to backfire spectacularly." I pulled out another folder. This one contained Isla's greatest hits: the podcast transcript, the LinkedIn posts, the text messages, and something new: a recording I'd been saving for the right moment. "What's this?" Steinberg asked as I set up my phone. "Voicemail, left on my personal phone Tuesday night at 11:47 p.m. I hit play. Isla's voice filled the room, slurred with whine and rage. "You think you're so fucking smart, don't you? Building your little technical fortress, making yourself indispensable. But I know what you are. You're a parasite sucking money from companies too stupid to see it. I'm going to destroy you. SEC, FBI, IRS. I'll bury you in investigations until you beg." I stopped the recording. There's 3 more minutes, but it doesn't get more coherent. Steinberg's expression had hardened from professional interest to genuine concern. "Have you filed a police report?" "My attorney is handling that," Christine said smoothly, "along with a restraining order and a civil suit for defamation and harassment." "I see." He closed his folder with decisive finality. "Ms. West, I believe we have everything we need. This investigation will be closed with no action recommended. However," he looked directly at me, "we'll be keeping Ms. Moreau's complaint in our files. False allegations to federal agencies carry serious consequences." "I'm not interested in revenge," I said, gathering my documents. "I just want to build exceptional technology without being attacked for it." "Understandable." He stood, extending his hand. "Thank you for your cooperation. And Ms. West, that ghost rail system, my brother works in logistics, says it's revolutionary. Tell him thank you, and if he has feature requests, my door's always open." We left the federal building at 10:23 a.m. Christine headed to the airport, but not before delivering her verdict. She overplayed her hand. The SEC complaint alone might have caused trouble, but 4 agencies, that screams vendetta, not legitimate concern. She just made herself radioactive to any regulatory body in the country. I stood on the sidewalk, San Francisco's morning fog beginning to burn off. Somewhere across town, Nexora's board was signing papers that would transfer ownership to Lyrian. Somewhere Isla was probably filing her 5th, 6th, 7th complaint. Somewhere my systems were running perfectly moving freight with algorithmic precision. My phone buzzed. A message from Margaret Pearson. "Acquisition closed. Your new contracts are fully assigned to Lyrian with all terms intact. Welcome to the next chapter." The next chapter. I like the sound of that. Another message, this one from Catherine Morrison. "Lyrian Board extends official welcome to our new Chief Technology Architect. Looking forward to expanding Ghost Rail nationally. When can you start planning Phase 2? Phase 2. National expansion. The system I'd built for one company now poised to optimize supply chains across the country." I walked back to my car, heels clicking on pavement with metronomic precision. The city hummed around me, trucks delivering goods, cranes moving containers, the endless ballet of logistics that most people never noticed. But I noticed. I saw the inefficiencies, the bottlenecks, the places where algorithms could save millions. And now, with Lyrian's resources, and no one like Marcus or Isla to interfere, I could build something truly transformative. My phone rang as I reached my Tesla. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Washington, D.C. "Ms. West, This is Director Sarah Patterson from the Department of Transportation. We've been following the innovations at Nexora with great interest. I'm wondering if you might have time to discuss how Ghost Rail could be applied to our national infrastructure challenges. I smiled, leaning against my car in the growing sunshine. Director Patterson, I'd be delighted. When were you thinking? As we scheduled a meeting that would eventually revolutionize how America moved its freight, I thought about Isla one last time. She'd tried to destroy me with PowerPoints and phone calls with lies and agencies. She'd failed to understand the fundamental truth: you can't destroy someone who builds essential things. You can only delay their ascent. And my delay was over. The Zoom call was scheduled for Monday morning at 10 a.m., exactly 1 week after Isla's PowerPoint ambush. But this time, I wasn't the one in the defendant's chair. I was the architect of consequences, and everyone on the call knew it. I logged in from my new office, the San Francisco skyline gleaming behind me through floor-to-ceiling windows. Natural light, not fluorescent. Power positioning, not defensive posturing. Every detail calculated to remind them who held the cards. The participants popped onto screen one by one. Margaret Pearson, now interim CEO, looked composed but tired. Janet Torres had her CFO face on neutral, with underlying anxiety. Thomas Hartman from Legal appeared to have aged 5 years in 7 days. And filling out the Brady Bunch grid, the entire boards of both Nexora and Lyrian. 23 faces staring at me through pixels and broadband. 23 people who'd learned the hard way that technical infrastructure wasn't just supporting structure, it was the structure itself. Good morning, everyone, I began, my voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd already won. I believe we have contracts to finalize. Catherine Morrison from Lyrian cleared her throat. Ms. West, before we proceed, we need to address the regulatory inquiries. All closed. I shared my screen displaying the official letters. SEC, no action recommended. FBI, no evidence of wrongdoing. IRS audit request withdrawn. Department of Labor complaint dismissed as retaliatory harassment. How did you, someone started, resolve them so quickly? Documentation. When you operate transparently from day one, false accusations dissolve under scrutiny. When you build your contracts correctly from the beginning, there's nothing to investigate except the accuser's motivations. I clicked to the next slide, a timeline of Isla's complaints, each one filed within hours of the last, all bearing the same IP address signature. Ms. Moreau's enthusiasm for justice apparently required filing 7 federal complaints from the same Starbucks Wi-Fi in Brentwood. The FBI found that interesting. A few nervous chuckles. Everyone understood the implication. Isla hadn't just overplayed her hand, she'd revealed her entire strategy in a way that made her legally radioactive. Now, I continued moving to the contract terms. Let's discuss the future. Ghost Rail's performance metrics for the past week. The numbers filled the screen. Despite the chaos, despite the leadership vacuum, despite everything, the system had delivered its best performance ever. Port predictions at 97.3% accuracy. Route optimizations saving an average of 12 minutes per delivery. 0 downtime. The machines don't care about your politics, I said simply. They just execute. Which is why Lyrian is acquiring not just a company, but a competitive advantage that compounds daily. About the terms, Margaret interjected. $6 million annual licensing. Is non-negotiable. I smiled pleasantly. However, I'm prepared to offer additional value. Phase 2 expansion to Lyrian's existing operations. Custom implementations for their specific challenges. Direct integration with their legacy systems. All included in the base price. Janet's fingers flew across her calculator. I could see her realizing what I already knew: the expansion alone was worth $20 million in consulting fees from any major firm. Furthermore, I added, I'm proposing a performance bonus structure. Every percentage point of improvement above baseline adds a multiplier to the licensing fee. But here's the catch. It's capped at 2x. I'm not interested in extracting infinite value. I'm interested in building exceptional systems. That's surprisingly reasonable, Catherine admitted. I'm not Isla Moreau, I said flatly. I don't optimize for extraction. I optimize for excellence. The money is just how we keep score. Thomas raised his hand like we were in school. The board position is essential, not because I want power, but because I need protection. This week proved that technical leadership without governance authority is vulnerable to any executive with a personal agenda and a PowerPoint license. Nods around the gallery view. They'd all seen how quickly Marcus had been swayed, how easily Isla had weaponized his weakness. I propose a new structure. I continued sharing a diagram I'd spent the weekend perfecting. Technology Committee of the Board, 3 members including myself. Any decision affecting core infrastructure requires committee approval. No more surprise consultants. No more politically motivated optimizations. Just rational decisions based on data. And if we refuse, this from a Lyrian board member I didn't recognize. I leaned back, letting silence build. Then, you're free to refuse. The existing contracts expire in 5 weeks. I'll ensure smooth transition to whatever solution you choose. Of course, Nexora will need to restate its earnings projections without the Ghost Rail savings. Lyrian will need to reevaluate the acquisition price based on actual operational capacity. And I'll need to decide which of the 17 competing offers for my services to accept. Savity, Margaret's eyebrows rose. As of this morning, apparently building systems that save $75 million annually while surviving corporate assassination attempts is an attractive resume line. More silence, the kind that preceded capitulation. I believe, Catherine said carefully, that your terms are acceptable. Legal will need to review the governance structure, but in principle, Lyrian agrees. One by one, the board members voiced their agreement. Some enthusiastic, some resigned. All. Recognizing the inevitable. You don't negotiate with gravity. You don't haggle with mathematics. And you don't lowball the person who holds your operational future in well-documented code. Excellent. I pulled up the signature pages. DocuSign links have been sent. Once executed, we can begin Phase 2 planning immediately. I have some ideas about predictive maintenance algorithms that could save another $12 million annually. As they signed 23 digital signatures appearing in real time, Thomas asked the question I'd been waiting for. What about Ms. Moreau? Do you intend to pursue civil action? I considered my words carefully. Isla Moreau is pursuing her own consequences. 7 false federal complaints. Recorded threats. Public defamation with documentable business impact. My attorney tells me she's looking at potential criminal charges for filing false reports, civil liability for defamation, and personal bankruptcy from legal fees. So you're not... I'm not doing anything. I don't need to. When you build your attack on lies, the truth doesn't need to fight back. It just needs to wait. The contract's completed signatures affixed the future locked in with legal precision. Margaret asked everyone except essential parties to drop off. Soon it was just her, Catherine, and me. Off the record, Margaret said. How long have you been planning this? Planning what? The structure, the protections, the careful documentation. This wasn't reactive. This was architectural. I smiled, the first genuine one all week. Margaret, I learned something early in my career. Being right isn't enough. Being talented isn't enough. Being essential isn't enough. You need systems that protect value from people who would extract it without understanding it. Like Isla. Like anyone who sees innovation as a threat rather than an opportunity. She was just this quarter's example. There will be others. Catherine nodded slowly. The committee structure, it's not just about protecting you. It's about protecting the technology from short-term thinking. Exactly. Ghost Rail will evolve. It will become more valuable, and someone will eventually suggest replacing it with something cheaper, or selling it off, or letting a consultant optimize it into obsolescence. The committee prevents that. You've thought of everything, Margaret said. No, I've just thought longer than most people are willing to. Isla thought in PowerPoint slides. Marcus thought in quarterly earnings. I think in system architectures. It's a different time horizon. We wrapped up with discussions of implementation timelines and transition planning. As I was about to log off, Margaret asked one final question. Erin, do you regret how this played out? If you could go back, would you do anything differently? I considered lying, offering some platitude about wishing it had been smoother. But these women had earned honesty. No, this was always going to happen. Someone was always going to see my value as a threat. The only question was whether I'd be prepared when they struck. I was. They weren't. End of query. The call ended, leaving me alone in my sunlit office with my signed contracts and my vindication. Through the windows, San Francisco sprawled beneath marine layer and possibility. Somewhere out there, trucks were moving more efficiently because of code I'd written. Somewhere shareholders were earning returns because of systems I'd designed. Somewhere Isla Moreau was learning that actions have consequences and documentation has teeth. But I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I was thinking about Phase 2, about national infrastructure, about algorithms that could revolutionize how America moved everything from packages to produce. My phone buzzed. A calendar reminder, team meeting 2 p.m. vision session. Time to stop looking backward at battles won and start building toward futures imagined. I closed my laptop, gathered my notes, and headed to the conference room where my team was waiting. The real work, the work that mattered, was just beginning. And this time, no one could stop us. The call ended at 11:47 a.m., leaving me alone in my office with the weight of absolute victory. No celebration, no fist pump, just the quiet satisfaction of watches clicking back into synchronized time after chaos tried to stop them. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. 40 floors below, San Francisco moved in its eternal dance, delivery trucks, threading through traffic guided by invisible algorithms I'd written. Each optimized route saved minutes. Minutes became hours. Hours became millions. And somewhere in a Brentwood apartment, Isla Moreau was discovering that burning bridges only lights the way to your own isolation. My phone vibrated. Another text from an unknown number, but this time I recognized the area code. Marcus. Erin, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Isla played me and I let her. Your systems, your work, they're brilliant. I just got lost in something else, something stupid. I hope Lyrian knows what they have in you. I deleted it without responding. Apologies from weak men were worth less than the pixels they consumed. Marcus had made his choice. Now he could live with the consequences: early retirement, a reputation in ruins, and the knowledge that he'd traded an empire for a consultant's empty promises. At noon, my assistant knocked. Ms. West, there's someone here to see you, says it's urgent. I found Sarah from procurement in my reception area, holding a bottle of champagne and wearing the biggest grin I'd ever seen on her face. Thought you should know, she said, popping the cork with practiced efficiency. Isla's LinkedIn is gone. Not private gone. And the word is she's leaving California entirely. Something about exploring opportunities in international markets. International markets. Code for running from the mess she created. Good, I said, accepting a glass. Maybe she'll learn something. Maybe she won't. Either way, she's someone else's problem now. We drank to that, to problem solved and future secured. Sarah left, and I returned to what mattered: the work. The afternoon dissolved into code reviews and architecture planning. My team, energized by stability and possibility, threw themselves into Phase 2 with the enthusiasm of people who'd been held back too long. We mapped expansion routes, designed new prediction models, imagined systems that would make Ghost Rail look like a rough draft. At 5 p.m., as the office emptied and the fog rolled in, I made one final call. Christine, it's Erin. Any updates on the restraining order? My lawyer's voice carried satisfaction. Granted, Ms. Moreau is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you, Nexora or Lyrian properties. She's also facing charges for filing false federal reports. The U.S. attorney seemed particularly interested in the pattern. Prison. Unlikely for a first offense, but substantial fines, probation, and a permanent record that will follow her to any country with extradition treaties. Her consulting career is over. I thanked Christine and hung up. Justice wasn't about prison. It was about consequences aligning with actions. Isla had built her career on destroying others. Now that career was destroyed. The symmetry satisfied something deep in my engineering soul. At 7 p.m., alone in my office with the city lights twinkling below, I pulled up the original email. The one I'd sent to Lyrian that had started the avalanche. Read it one more time, then archived it in a folder labeled Lessons. Because that's what this was, a lesson. Not in revenge, though it might look that way to outsiders. A lesson in preparation. In documentation. In understanding that talent without protection is vulnerability. I'd spent 18 months building two things in parallel: a logistics system that saved millions and a legal framework that protected that value. Isla saw only the first. Marcus saw only the surface. The board saw only the numbers. But I saw the whole architecture, technical and legal, operational and political. A system robust enough to withstand attack from any angle. My computer chimed. An email from Director Patterson at the Department of Transportation, Ms. West. Following up on our conversation, the Secretary is very interested in your proposal for national infrastructure optimization. Can you present to the full committee next month? The next chapter. Not just private sector efficiency, but public benefit. Systems that could reduce emissions, save taxpayer dollars, improve emergency response times. The work I'd always dreamed of doing now possible, because I'd refused to let a predator in a white dress reduce me to a cautionary tale. I drafted my response accepting the invitation, then shut down my systems for the night. 3 monitors went dark in sequence like eyes closing after standing watch. In the elevator down, I thought about patterns. How Isla represented something larger, the mediocre attempting to feast on the exceptional, assuming that political maneuvering could substitute for actual value creation. She'd learned too late that you can't optimize what you don't understand, can't destroy what you can't replicate, can't steal what was protected from the very beginning. The parking garage was empty except for my Tesla, and the memory of that Monday morning sitting in shock while planning my response. A week later, everything had changed. CEO gone. Predator banished. My position secured with contractual armor. But the code remained the same. The algorithms kept running. The systems kept saving. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not the drama or the politics, or the poison dressed up as optimization. Just the work, elegant and essential, running silently in the background while humans performed their theatrical productions in conference rooms. I drove home through empty streets guided by traffic patterns my own systems had helped optimize. Full circle, always full circle. In my apartment, I poured a final glass of wine and stood on my balcony city, spread below like a circuit board. Somewhere trucks were moving. Somewhere warehouses were humming. Somewhere the future was being built one function at a time. Isla Moreau thought she'd found weakness in my licensing structure. Instead, she'd found the trap I'd built for anyone arrogant enough to attack without understanding. Marcus thought he'd found a weapon in his new lover. Instead, he'd found the architect of his own downfall. And me, I'd found what I'd always known, that if you build something essential and protect it properly, no amount of PowerPoint slides or podcast lies or federal complaints can tear it down. The wine was perfect. The night was clear. And tomorrow I'd wake up and continue building systems that mattered, surrounded by people who understood their value. Not a bad ending for a week that started with someone trying to destroy me. Not an ending at all, really. Just a clean compile before the next deployment. I raised my glass to the city lights, to the code running in server farms, to everyone who'd ever been targeted by an Isla Moreau and survived to build another day. My systems run fine, I said to the night air, just not under liars. And with that, I went inside, closed the door on the past week, and started sketching algorithms for tomorrow. The machines were waiting. The future was calling. And I had work to do. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're experiencing this tale of corporate revenge and technological triumph. Please drop a comment below sharing your location and thoughts. Let's connect and discuss what resonated with you. If this story of justice served cold through code and contracts spoke to you, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. And if you really want to help more people discover stories like this, smash that hype button to boost this video's reach. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share the next story with you.